Coming up on 5 Minute News. Protests continue in Iran as 19 children are killed. Putin says Kerch Bridge attack is a terrorist act by Kyiv. And California tribes to manage and protect state coastal areas. It's Monday, October 10. I'm Anthony Davis. Protests ignited by the death of a young woman in police custody continued across Iran last night in defiance of a crackdown by the authorities and as a human rights group said at least 185 people, including children, had been killed in demonstrations. Iranian schoolchildren were being arrested inside school premises on Sunday by security forces arriving in vans without license plates, according to social media reports emerging from the country as protests against the regime entered their fourth week. The authorities also shut all schools and higher education institutions in Iranian Kurdistan on Sunday, a sign that the state remains concerned about dissent after weeks of protests over the death of Masha Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman. Footage showed protests in dozens of cities across Iran early Sunday, with hundreds of high school girls and university students participating in the face of tear gas, clubs, and in many cases live ammunition by the security forces, rights groups said. Tehran has denied that live bullets have been used. On Saturday, Iran's main news channel was briefly hacked and interrupted with images and messages in support of the continuing protests. The scale of the protests is disputed, with government officials saying that Western-backed media are giving a false picture of scattered gatherings that quickly dissolve once security forces arrive. However, the Norway-based Iran human rights group said on Saturday that at least 185 people, including 19 children, have been killed in the country-wide demonstrations. Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling the attack on the Kerch Bridge to Crimea a terrorist act carried out by Ukrainian special services. There is no doubt it was a terrorist act directed at the destruction of critically important civilian infrastructure, Putin said in a video of a meeting on Sunday with the chairman of Russia's investigative committee, Alexander Bastrykhin. Bastrykhin said Ukrainian special services and citizens of Russia and other countries took part in the act. We have already established the route of the truck that Russian authorities have said set off a bomb and explosion on the bridge, he said. The explosion on Saturday hit the huge bridge linking Russia with the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow annexed 8 years ago. The attack on the Kerch Bridge damaged an important supply route for the Kremlin's forces and was a blow to Russian prestige. Overnight missile strikes on the city of Zaporizhia brought down part of a large apartment building, leaving at least a dozen people dead. The strike comes as Russia has suffered a series of setbacks nearly 8 months after invading Ukraine in a campaign many thought would be short-lived. In recent weeks, Ukrainian forces have staged a counter-offensive, retaking areas in the south and the east, while Moscow's decision to call up more troops has led to protests and an exodus of tens of thousands of Russians. 5 California tribes will reclaim their right to manage coastal land, significant to their history, under a first-in-the-nation program backed with $3.6 million in state money. The tribes will rely on their traditional knowledge to protect more than 200 miles of coastline in the state, as climate change and human activity have impacted the vast area. Some of the tribe's work will include monitoring salmon after the removal of a century-old defunct dam in the redwood forests in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and testing for toxins in shellfish, while also educating future generations on traditional practices. The partnership comes 3 years after Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom apologized for the state's previous violence and mistreatment against indigenous peoples. Newsom said the state should allow for more co-management of tribes' ancestral lands. Megan Roker, who's on the Tribal Marine Stewards Network's Leadership Council, said these coastal areas hold cultural significance for various tribes, making the partnership monumental. The network plans to create agreements between tribes and with state government for managing these areas. In 2020, Ocean Protection Council staff recommended the agency set aside $1 million towards the pilot program to support the network in conducting research, reaching out to tribes, and creating plans for the future. Taking inspiration from similar partnerships in Australia and Canada, the group said they hope other networks bloom across the US. Multiple tribe leaders referenced Newsom's public apology in explaining part of why the network's public launch is happening now. In recent years, US officials have committed to collaborating with tribes on managing public lands. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.